My name is Traci Monroe. I'm 28 years old. And this is the story of how my father tried to erase my mother's memory, and how I made sure he never succeeded. The knock came at 9:17 a.m. on a Sunday. That might seem like a small detail, but for someone like me, who treasures silence like other people treasure heirlooms, it was jarring. My home wasn't just a house. It was sacred. It was the place my mother died in, yes, but more than that, it was where she lived. She bought it when I was only 8 years old, working nights at the hospital and tutoring part-time just to afford the down payment. Every rose bush out front, every wobbly tile in the kitchen, every faded sticker still on the attic door bore her fingerprint. When she passed away from heart failure 4 years ago, she left the house to me in her will. No conditions. No caveats. Just a simple line, to my daughter Traci, the only person I ever fully trusted. That Sunday morning, I'd just made my coffee and was about to settle in with an old notebook of hers, one filled with little journal entries and grocery lists she never threw away, when the doorbell rang. And I just knew in the pit of my stomach, that this was not going to be a good day. I opened the door to see my father, Thomas Monroe, standing next to his new wife Rebecca and her daughter, Haley. Haley, the 24-year-old stepdaughter I barely knew. Haley, who never visited mom in the hospital. Haley, who wore acrylic nails that made her seem like she was constantly pointing at something beneath her. And Haley, very visibly pregnant. She wore this smug half-smile like it was makeup. The kind of smile that said she was already a few moves ahead, and all I had to do was catch up. My father was holding a folder under his arm, like he was trying to look official. Rebecca had her hands clasped together like she was praying. And I should have slammed the door. I should have told them to leave right then and there. But I didn't. I let them in. And I regret that. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where my mother used to make me hot cocoa when I couldn't sleep. The same table where she'd once written "You are enough" on a napkin during one of my worst depressive spirals. And now here they were, sipping tea like they were guests in a hotel, not invaders in a shrine. "I'll just be direct," Rebecca said, voice soft and sugary, like she was trying to sell me a product I didn't ask for. "Haley's situation is delicate. Mason left her. She's 6 months along. We're running out of space at our apartment, and she needs a stable home." I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. Then at my father. "You live here alone, Traci," he added, as if being alone were a sin. "And this house, it's big. It has more than enough room. Haley could take the upstairs. Just until the baby comes. Maybe a little after. It's not forever." I took a slow sip of coffee, even though my hands were shaking. "She could move in with you," I said to Rebecca. "Or you could get a bigger place." Rebecca gave a tight smile. "You know we can't afford that right now. Besides, your mother would have wanted this." I slammed the cup down. It cracked. "No," I said coldly. "You don't get to speak for my mother." Haley finally spoke, rubbing her belly like it was a bargaining chip. "I just thought maybe we could be sisters. Like a real family." I almost laughed. A real family? My father hadn't shown up to my college graduation. He hadn't even come to my mother's funeral. He sent flowers. No note. Now, with Haley pregnant and struggling, I was suddenly useful? A tool? A stepping stone? I stood up. "This house is mine," I said, my voice trembling. "Legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. It's mine. You have 5 minutes to get out." Rebecca's mouth opened like she wanted to protest, but I raised a hand. She froze. My father looked down at the folder he'd brought and mumbled, "We'll talk again." They left. Haley cast one last glance back, eyes narrowed like a girl who had never been told no in her life. And I stood in the doorway for a full 5 minutes after they were gone, willing myself not to cry. But I did. Because I knew that wasn't the end. It was the opening shot. I found out just how far they'd go 3 days later. I came home from work and my key didn't fit. The locks had been changed. On my front door was a taped note, in my father's handwriting. For safety. Call us to talk. My knees nearly buckled. I fumbled with my phone and dialed him, rage and disbelief choking me. He answered like it was a casual thing. You've been under a lot of stress, he said smoothly. This'll be better for everyone. Haley's moving in tonight. I don't even remember what I screamed. Only that I hung up shaking, drove straight to a locksmith, and called the police on the way home. That night, they unlocked my house and restored what was mine. But something in me shifted. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a hostile takeover. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called out, citing a personal emergency, which, technically, it was. I didn't sleep more than a couple hours the night before. I just kept walking around the house like I was trying to reassure the walls that they were still mine. I'd always thought people exaggerated when they said betrayal felt physical, like a punch. But they were right. The moment I saw that changed lock, that smug note, that deliberate attempt to shove me out of my own mother's legacy, I felt something shatter in my chest. It wasn't just pain. It was a mix of humiliation, fury, and this deep-rooted ache that told me I'd been too passive for too long. I made 2 decisions that morning. 1, I was going to secure this house so tightly that no one could get within 10 feet of it without me knowing, and 2, I was going to take legal action. Not just to reclaim the house, but to protect it, for good. I started with the security company. I paid for 24-hour surveillance. Motion-activated cameras at every entry point. Door and window sensors. Cloud storage with remote access. I didn't care about the cost. That house wasn't just 4 walls. It was the last thing my mother ever gave me. The technician who installed the system must have sensed the tension radiating off me because he didn't ask questions. Just nodded, installed the cameras, and left me with the remote login information and a firm handshake. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Amanda Clean, a sharp real estate attorney recommended by my coworker, Lena. I walked into her office with every document I could find, my mother's notarized will, the house deed, even photographs of her signature on the day she signed it. Amanda read everything in silence, her pen tapping lightly against the desk. When I finished talking, when I told her about the manipulation, the guilt-tripping, the lock-changing, the suggestion that I share my house with a stepsister I barely knew, Amanda leaned back and said something that would stay with me. They're not just pushing boundaries, she said. They're testing how far they can drag you before you give up. But legally, you have the advantage. Then she opened a file drawer and pulled out a document. It was a scan of a legal inquiry my father had submitted to a law firm 2 months earlier. The header had his name, Thomas Monroe. My stomach dropped. He asked about reclassifying the property as joint family ownership, Amanda explained. Claimed there was an oversight in the will. Tried to argue that your mother never intended for you to have sole control. I sat there frozen. This wasn't a desperate father trying to help his pregnant stepdaughter. This was a man who had been quietly orchestrating a hostile takeover. Can they do that? I asked. Amanda shook her head. No. Your mother's will is airtight. But if you don't act, they might try to drag it into probate court and tie you up in months of legal headaches. I left her office with signed documents in my hand, ownership confirmation, cease and desist letters, formal filings that put legal teeth behind every future action. That night, I reviewed my new security camera feed from my phone every 5 minutes. Nothing happened. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No knocks. No calls. But I knew better. Silence, in families like mine, wasn't peace. It was plotting. And I was right. The next attack wasn't a door knock, it was psychological warfare. That Friday, I came home to find a baby shower gift bag on my porch. Inside was a soft yellow blanket, a pacifier, and a framed ultrasound photo. No note. No return address. They were trying to claim my space, again, this time with sweetness. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I took a picture of the bag, then threw it in the trash and added the image to a new folder I'd started on my laptop, evidence. It grew fast. The following Monday, a realtor showed up unannounced at my front porch. A young woman with bright eyes and an apologetic smile. "Hi. Your father said you might be open to seeing apartment options closer to downtown?" I stared at her like she had 3 heads. "I never contacted a realtor," I said. "Please leave." She blinked. He said you were looking for something smaller." "This is my home," I said firmly. "And no one, not my father, not a realtor, is authorized to make decisions for me." The next day, I got a Facebook message from my aunt, my dad's sister. She wrote, "Traci, I know things are tense. But Haley's baby is innocent. Can't you compromise a little? Maybe a 6-month arrangement? You don't want to be remembered as the sister who let a child suffer." I blocked her. I blocked every extended family member who had the audacity to guilt-trip me without knowing the full story. Because I realized then, I wasn't fighting for just the house anymore. I was fighting for the right to set a boundary and have it respected. And it was a lonely, brutal fight. But I wasn't about to lose. That Friday, I finally got a call from my dad again. "I just want us to be a family," he said. "Families don't change the locks on each other," I replied. There was silence. Then he said, "You're going to regret this. When Haley's baby grows up, they'll know you turned your back." That's when I knew. He wasn't going to stop. So neither would I. I used to think battles were fought in courtrooms or on front lawns with yelling neighbors. But real battles? The ones that tear you apart slowly? They're fought in living rooms. Through carefully worded voicemails, uninvited gifts, and relatives who only reach out when someone else tells them to. It had been 3 weeks since I filed the cease and desist through Amanda. 3 weeks since the stroller, the realtor, the baby gift bag. And now, after blocking every known number from my father, Rebecca, and Haley, I was finally sleeping through the night again. But peace, as I've learned, doesn't last when you're dealing with people who see no as a challenge, not a boundary. It was a Friday evening. A drizzle tapped lightly on my windows and the air smelled like wet pine. I had just finished my first stress-free dinner in weeks when the doorbell rang again. I froze. I knew that tone. It wasn't a pizza delivery or a lost Amazon package. It was slow, deliberate. Like someone who knew they weren't supposed to be there, but rang anyway. I glanced at my phone and opened the app connected to my security system. There they were. My father. Rebecca. Haley. And in Haley's arms, a baby. I didn't open the door immediately. I watched through the screen for a solid 30 seconds, wondering if I should even acknowledge them. But I knew them. If I didn't open the door, they'd twist it into some story where I was heartless and selfish and hiding behind a screen while a newborn baby froze outside. So I opened the door. But just a crack. My eyes flicked to the camera above the porch, blinking red. It was recording. No one spoke at first. Only the baby made a sound, a small coo that punched something soft in my chest. Rebecca stepped forward first. "Natalie." I cut her off. "It's Traci." She flinched but kept going. "Traci. This is Juliet. Your niece." I looked at the baby, swaddled in pink, a tiny tuft of reddish blonde hair barely visible under her cap. Then I looked at Haley. She wasn't smiling anymore. She wasn't smug. Just tired. Her eyes had dark rings under them, and she held the baby like she was holding her last lifeline. I know you hate me, she whispered. But this isn't about me. It's about her. Juliet deserves more than a cramped apartment and a stressed-out mother. She deserves a family. I said nothing. My father stepped in next, his voice unnervingly calm. We're not here to fight. We're here to just ask you to reconsider. You have a home. A beautiful one. We don't want to take it. We want to share it. There it was again, share. A word they used like a weapon. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me, keeping my hand firmly on the knob. You want to share something that doesn't belong to you, I said flatly. You didn't build it. You didn't maintain it. You didn't care about it until you saw a use for it. Rebecca opened her mouth, but I raised my voice slightly. No. Let me finish. I looked at each of them, letting the silence stretch just enough to sting. I'm not heartless. But I'm also not stupid. You've guilt me, harassed me, and tried to take this house through emotional manipulation and legal threats. You changed my locks. You broke into my life and acted like I owed you something. But the baby, Haley started, is not a bargaining chip, I snapped. I'm not going to let you weaponize a child to justify stealing a home. My father's face darkened. So you're really going to do this? Pretend like we're not family? I took a breath so deep it hurt. You're not my family, I said quietly. Family protects each other. Respects each other. You tried to erase my mother's final wish just because Haley's boyfriend left and you didn't want to deal with consequences. You didn't ask. You decided. And now you want me to play savior. Rebecca stepped closer, but I stepped back. I've already filed legal protections. Any further attempts to enter this property or contact me directly will be met with charges. This is your final warning. You'll regret this, my father muttered, his jaw clenched. No, I said, turning the doorknob. I'm finally protecting what I should have protected the moment you showed up. My mother's legacy. My peace. And myself. Then I closed the door. And this time, I locked it from the inside and leaned my forehead against the wood, breathing slowly, steadying myself. Because I knew what I'd done wasn't easy. It wasn't cold. It was necessary. That night, I wrote a letter to Amanda, detailing the encounter. I attached a copy of the video from the security feed and asked her to move forward with a restraining order if any of them returned. 2 days passed. Then a week. No gifts. No knocks. No creepy realtor visits. Just silence. And silence, for once, felt like safety. But something in me knew this wasn't the end. It was the retreat before the next round. And I would be ready for it. You don't really understand the meaning of peace until it's threatened. For the next few weeks, I lived in a kind of tentative calm, like the moment after a storm when the skies look blue but you can still smell ozone in the air. I worked during the day, kept my phone silent, and checked my security cameras every evening before bed. It was obsessive, I'll admit, but necessary. I had to know, had to be sure, that no one was circling back, trying to slip in through a crack I hadn't sealed. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was the waiting. Because deep down, I knew my father and Rebecca weren't done. People like them don't just accept no. They treat it like a suggestion that needs a better argument. And that argument came in the form of a letter. Not from them directly, of course, but from their attorney. It arrived by certified mail. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, with a Seattle firm's logo printed elegantly in the top left corner. I opened it at my kitchen counter with trembling hands and an even shakier heart. The letter was 6 pages long. Carefully worded. Disgustingly polite. It claimed that my father had reason to believe my mother's will may have been influenced by duress or mental decline, and that family unity required a re-examination of the intent of property distribution. I remember reading that phrase over and over. Re-examination of the intent of property distribution. They were trying to call into question the legality of my mother's final wish. It was a quiet form of erasure. A knife wrapped in velvet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I photocopied the letter and sent it to Amanda with a single sentence. I want to fight this. She responded within 2 hours. They don't have a case. But that doesn't mean they won't try to build one. We're filing a formal notice of interest to prevent any attempts to sell or transfer the title, and we'll start gathering sworn affidavits to support the will's validity. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went into the attic. It still smelled like old books and lavender sachets. The air was dry, the light dim. I opened a cedar chest where my mother had kept some of her old journals and cards, things she treasured but never displayed. And there, in her handwriting, I found a birthday letter she had written to me when I turned 24. The same year she passed. Traci, my strongest girl. I know you prefer quiet over crowds, solitude over spotlight. But you are anything but small. You carry me every day in your resilience. If something ever happens to me, I want you to remember this: you were my home, even more than I was yours. Don't let anyone take that from you. I broke. I clutched that letter to my chest and sobbed on the attic floor, not because I felt weak, but because I had needed that reminder more than anything. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about memory. About promise. About love. I scanned that letter into my records folder and sent a copy to Amanda. She responded with a simple, "This helps more than you know." Weeks passed. Amanda filed our legal responses, and I gave a sworn statement to solidify my position. I didn't hear from my father again, not directly. But the whispers came. A cousin messaged me, pretending to check in. An old family friend tagged me in a post about forgiveness and unity. Haley posted a black and white photo of Juliet on Instagram with the caption, "Some people will never understand what real sacrifice means." And I realized something: they weren't giving up. They were regrouping. Haley wasn't trying to appeal to me anymore. She was appealing to everyone else. Trying to paint me as selfish. Cold. The wicked half-sister who refused to share. And yet, I stayed quiet. Because I had something they didn't, the truth. That, and a fire they never saw coming. Because in the time they spent building narratives and twisting public opinion, I was building something else. Power. I took a side job consulting for a small law firm downtown. Not glamorous, but steady. I didn't need the money, I needed the experience. And while I worked, I studied property law, estate planning, digital security, privacy management. I turned every lunch break into a class. I also met with a private investigator, a woman named Marlene who specialized in family fraud. Within 2 weeks, she uncovered something I hadn't known: my father had tried to take out a home equity loan against a property he didn't own. He was denied, but he'd tried. I forwarded the report to Amanda. "This," she said, "is what we call attempted fraud. We can use this if they escalate." I started sleeping better after that. But the final blow didn't come from court papers. It came from the one person who had been silent all along. My grandmother. She was my mother's mother, a woman who rarely interfered and spoke only when it mattered. I hadn't heard from her in nearly a year, not since her last hospitalization. Then she called. "Traci," she said, her voice rasping through the line, "I saw what they tried to do." My throat tightened. "Grandma. You remind me of her, you know," she whispered. "Your mother. She always stood her ground, even when it broke her heart." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "I want you to know something," she continued. "Your mother told me, in her last days, that she wasn't afraid of dying. She was only afraid that the wrong people would get close to you. That's why she left the house in your name alone. Tears slipped down my cheeks. She didn't leave you that house, Traci, she said. She left you a shield. And I knew, in that moment, I would never surrender it. Not now. Not ever. There's a certain strength that only shows up when you feel like there's no one left behind you. But that's where the clarity comes in. Because when all the noise fades, when the fake concern and guilt trips dry up, you start hearing yourself again. Your own voice. Your own truth. And I was done being silent. The call from my grandmother gave me a kind of inner authority I hadn't realized I needed. Not because I needed permission, but because I needed grounding. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. That my mother's love wasn't just a memory, but a fact, stamped into other people's memories too. I thought that might be the last emotional wall they could climb. But my father? He wasn't done. Because when abusers can't win through affection or guilt, they turn to shame. 2 weeks later, I was walking out of my office building when Lena, my coworker and closest friend, waved me over to her desk. "You okay?" she asked, frowning slightly. "You've been a ghost all day." "I'm fine," I replied automatically. But my voice was tight. She turned her monitor around. "You might want to see this." My heart dropped. It was a post. Public. From a Facebook group called Families Supporting Single Mothers. The headline? "When Siblings Choose Property Over People, a Cautionary Tale About Greed." And the story? It was mine. Twisted. Distorted. Told from the perspective of an unnamed younger sister who was kicked out onto the streets with a newborn while her older sister clung to a 2-bedroom house she didn't even need. They didn't mention me by name. But they didn't have to. They added just enough breadcrumbs. Tacoma, only child from the first marriage, nurse's daughter, independent accountant. Anyone who knew our family, or had stalked my page, would know exactly who it was about. The comments were a nightmare. "How heartless can you be? No wonder she's alone. That baby deserves better than a bitter sister with a grudge." I stared at the screen and felt the blood drain from my face. But Lena? She wasn't having it. "You're not going to let this stand, are you?" she asked. "They're slandering you." "I know," I whispered. "And now they've made it public." That night, I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I read every comment. Took screenshots. And cried until my eyes were raw. Then I stopped crying. I closed the laptop. And I made a new folder. Public retaliation. I called Amanda first thing in the morning. She was furious. Defamation. Defamation with intent to coerce. And if we can prove that Haley or Rebecca posted this, or that Thomas funded it, we can escalate. I gave her every screenshot. Every thread. Every breadcrumb. And then I called Marlene, my investigator. "I need to know exactly who posted it," I told her. "I don't care how long it takes." It didn't take long. 2 days later, she called back. "It's an account linked to a burner email address, but the IP traces to a business registered under Rebecca Monroe's maiden name." I closed my eyes. "They created an entire campaign," Marlene added. "Tried to go viral with it. Hashtags. Scheduled posts. Coordinated. So this wasn't just family drama. This was targeted harassment." Amanda filed a cease and desist immediately. And a warning letter. Then she asked me something simple, but devastating. "Do you want to settle this quietly, or do you want to go public?" I took one long breath and answered with steel in my voice. "I want them to regret ever targeting me." I wasn't going to respond with words or posts. I was going to respond with proof. The next week, I filed a counterclaim against Thomas, Rebecca, and Haley. For defamation, unlawful lock change, and attempted property fraud. Amanda submitted copies of the will, security footage, witness affidavits, including one from my grandmother, and the investigator's report. I didn't just want them to back off. I wanted a legal record that would follow them forever. And then I did something Haley never saw coming. I made a call to Mason. Yeah, that Mason. Haley's ex. The one who'd disappeared after their Facebook blow-up. He picked up after the second ring. Traci? His voice was hesitant. I didn't expect. I don't want anything from you, I interrupted. Just the truth. He went quiet. I saw what they did to you too, I said. They tried to do it to me. Twist the story. Use guilt. Use the baby. There was a long pause. Then he spoke. I never wanted to leave Juliet, he said softly. I just couldn't deal with Rebecca anymore. Or your dad. They tried to rope me into this story, say you were cold, a shut-in, greedy. He sighed. I should have said something earlier. Now's your chance. He agreed to submit a signed statement, confirming that he'd been pressured by Rebecca and Thomas to post false things about me to sway public sympathy for Haley. That they'd tried to use Juliet's birth as a pawn. And Amanda smiled when she saw it. This, she said, is the nail in the coffin. Because you see, the law doesn't care about Facebook clout. It cares about patterns. And now I had a pattern. Of harassment. Of manipulation. Of premeditated deceit. And the consequences were finally coming. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. I sat quietly next to Amanda, fingers laced tightly in my lap, the buzz of tension humming behind my ears. This wasn't a full-blown trial, it was a preliminary hearing for the restraining order and my civil suit. But it felt like Judgment Day. Across the room sat my father, stone-faced. Rebecca, wearing a conservative navy suit 2 sizes too tight, her face powdered to perfection. And Haley, she didn't even glance at me. She was holding Juliet on her lap, rocking her gently, as if bringing a baby into the courtroom was some kind of shield. A sympathy weapon. But I wasn't here to play their game anymore. I was here to finish what they started. Amanda stood when the judge asked for our opening statement. Calm, composed, razor-sharp. Your Honor, she began, we are here today not only to defend my client's legal property rights, but also to address a sustained pattern of harassment, coercion, and defamation initiated by her biological father and his current family. My client, Traci Monroe, has been stalked, emotionally manipulated, and publicly humiliated, all in an attempt to force her to surrender a home she inherited directly from her late mother. She laid the documents down in front of the clerk, my mother's will, the cease and desist letters, screenshots of the Facebook slander, the private investigator's report. And finally, Mason's signed statement. You could hear the air shift. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ms. Clean, you're asserting that the defendants attempted property fraud and harassment, using a minor child as part of their coercive tactics? Yes, Your Honor, Amanda replied. And we are seeking a formal restraining order, full reimbursement for legal expenses, and a public retraction of defamatory statements made online and through family channels. When it was their turn to speak, my father cleared his throat and stood up slowly. Your Honor, he said, trying to sound sincere, I'm not a villain. I'm a father trying to keep his family together. My daughter Traci, she's always been distant. A bit closed off. I was worried about her mental health. And when Haley got pregnant, I saw an opportunity to bring them closer. Maybe under one roof. I scoffed under my breath. Amanda touched my arm gently, a reminder, let him hang himself with his own words. I admit we may have been too forward, he continued. But we were trying to create stability. Not division. The judge leaned forward. And changing the locks on a property you do not own, without notice, was part of that stability? He hesitated. I thought maybe she needed a push. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Amanda stood again. And does that push include anonymous slander online, Mr. Monroe? Rebecca jumped in. Those posts weren't meant to hurt anyone. They were awareness pieces. About how hard it is for single mothers. Written by someone using a false identity and a fake business registry, Amanda interrupted, pulling up the IP trace documentation. Shall I read aloud the alias Susan Palmer, registered to a P.O. box you use for your Etsy store? Rebecca's mouth twitched. The judge exhaled slowly. I've seen enough. Ms. Monroe's evidence is not only thorough, it's damning. The attempt to take possession of her property through deception, coercion, and public pressure is inexcusable. Then came the words that unknotted something inside my chest. Restraining order granted for all 3 defendants. Legal fees will be reimbursed to Ms. Monroe. This court strongly recommends the plaintiff pursue additional damages in civil court if she so chooses. I didn't move. I didn't blink. But inside? I was screaming. My father's face went pale. Haley finally looked up, a flash of panic in her eyes. Rebecca sat stiffly, blinking like she couldn't compute what had just happened. When we left the courthouse, Amanda gave me a small smile. It's not everything. But it's enough for now. It was more than enough. I didn't go home right away. I drove to the cemetery instead. My mother's grave was simple. A smooth stone etched with her name and one line she'd chosen herself. She gave everything so her daughter could have peace. I knelt down, brushing off a few fallen pine needles, and placed a single sunflower on the headstone. You were right, Mom, I whispered. He tried. But I didn't let him. The wind rustled softly through the trees. Later that week, I made one final move. I contacted a nonprofit that helps foster youth transition out of care. I'd spoken to them once before, months ago. But now it was real. I signed a preliminary agreement that if anything ever happened to me, if I passed away without heirs, the house would go to them, to use as a transitional living home for girls aging out of the system. Amanda reviewed the paperwork herself. It's airtight, she said. Your mother would be proud. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to break the cycle. Because my father believed a house was just a thing you could take. But I knew better. It was a promise. A shield. And now? A legacy. The week after the court ruling felt like walking through a newly cleaned room, one I'd spent years too afraid to touch. Everything felt clearer. Lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had finally been acknowledged. Seen. Respected. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had taken all the shoes and burned them. Rebecca tried once more to email me. A long-winded message about forgiveness, family, and how Juliet shouldn't grow up resenting her aunt. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Amanda, who logged it in the restraining order file and sent them a final written warning. Then I blocked the email permanently. I also removed the last remnants of them from my home. A dusty photo frame in the attic that still had a picture of me, my father, and my mom from my 10th birthday. I replaced it with one of just me and her at the kitchen table, our hands touching as we laughed. Haley's baby gift bag, which I'd shoved in a closet out of guilt. Gone. The scratchy throw blanket Rebecca gave me as a peace offering the year after my mother died. Donated. It wasn't revenge. It was release. I didn't do it in rage. I did it to reclaim every square inch of my mother's house, and my peace. 1 month later, Amanda called with good news. The deed is permanently locked now, she said. We've filed legal precautions against future challenges. Even if someone tried to contest the will again, they'd have to get through 3 notarized affidavits, a property ownership history, and a recorded restraining order. She paused. You're safe, Traci. Legally and otherwise. I thanked her, then sat on the couch in silence. The kind of silence that didn't feel like waiting, but like resting. That same day, Lena showed up on my porch again with a bottle of rose, a stack of pastel paper lanterns, and a determined glint in her eye. "Don't argue," she said. "It's your rebirth party." "What?" "You heard me. You've been through hell and won. So we're celebrating." It started small, just Lena, my coworker Jamal, our elderly neighbor Connie, and 2 friends from a local book club I'd joined. We strung the paper lanterns up between the backyard apple trees. Someone brought brownies. Connie brought a tray of tiny cucumber sandwiches and lemonade spiked with something she refused to disclose. The sun set. The fairy lights came on. And someone played an old Billie Holiday record from their phone. We laughed. Really laughed. And at one point, someone asked about the legal stuff. I smiled and just said, "Handled." No drama. No revenge speech. Just peace. The best part of the night came when Connie pulled me aside. She handed me a small, square box. "Your mother once gave this to me to hold," she said. "Told me to pass it on when the time was right." Inside was a key. I blinked. "But I already." She shook her head. "Not to the house. To the lockbox at the bank. She said you'd need it someday." I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I went to the bank and opened the deposit box. Inside was a velvet pouch. And inside that, a gold bracelet. Simple, elegant, with a single engraving on the inside. "For Traci. When you're ready to choose peace over survival." There was also a folded note. In my mother's handwriting. "I knew they'd come for you one day. Not just Thomas, but the world. People who smile while planning to take. I wish I could shield you forever. But I trust you. And I know you'll protect what matters. Not just the house, but your heart. When you wear this bracelet, I want you to remember, you are not small. You are not selfish. You are not wrong for saying no. You are the end of a cycle." I left the bank in tears. But they weren't sad tears. They were release. A month later, I updated my will. Left the house in trust for that nonprofit. And added something else, a personal note, to be passed along to whoever lived there next. In it, I wrote, "This house was once a battleground. But now it's a sanctuary. If you live here, know that you are worthy of love without condition. And you don't owe anyone your peace, not even if they share your blood." I also closed every social media account linked to my family name. Started fresh. No more watching for cryptic posts. No more worrying about what distant relatives might think. I wasn't hiding, I was healing. And here's what I learned in the end. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who once held your hand. Sometimes they come with baby blankets and sweet voices. And sometimes they come with legal letters and smiling lies. But you still have the right to say no. You still have the right to protect what's yours. Not out of spite, but out of love. For your past. For your peace. For the people who believed in you when no one else did. I never heard from my father again. Haley stopped posting. Whether she was embarrassed, warned by her lawyer, or just done, I didn't care. They were gone. And I was free. Traci's story is a powerful reminder that family is not defined by blood, it's defined by respect. When manipulation wears the mask of love, the bravest thing you can do is protect your peace, even if it means standing alone. And sometimes, protecting a home isn't about bricks and keys, it's about defending the dignity of those who came before you. What would you have done in Traci's place? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand against someone you were supposed to trust? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more raw, emotional stories of betrayal, justice, and strength that comes from standing your ground.